The chaos of the battle raged around the last light as it navigated through the debris of what had once been the Galactic Council's capital fleet. Captain Elena Voss stood at the helm, her knuckles white against the cold metal of the control console. The ship's systems hummed beneath her fingertips, each warning light flashing a grim reminder that their chances of survival were slime. "Captain, we're losing shields at port," Lieutenant Kara said, her voice steady but laced with concern. "If we don't break through soon, we'll be sitting ducks." Voss's eyes flicked to the readouts. The Zarnak fleet, a massive and overwhelming force of sleek, dark ships bristling with weaponry, had already torn through half of the Council's fleet in a matter of hours. It wasn't just the power of their ships, though. The Zarnak's tactics, ruthless, precise, and unforgiving, had shattered every defense in their path. Their technology, both organic and mechanical, was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. They were more than conquerors, they were predators. "Prepare for evasive maneuvers, Kara," Voss commanded. "Get us to that jump point." The lieutenant nodded and quickly adjusted the helm. The ship swerved, narrowly avoiding a barrage of laser fire from a Zarnak destroyer. The impact of a nearby explosion rocked the last light, throwing the crew off balance. Voss gritted her teeth, holding her ground. The ship's aging frame groaned under the pressure, but it held together. For now. "We're not going to make it," said Commander Jace Malin, the ship's second-in-command, his voice tinged with frustration. He'd been trying to contact the rest of the human fleet for hours, but the Zarnak jamming technology made communication impossible. "They've already cut us off from the rest of the fleet. We're isolated." Voss didn't need to hear the words to know the truth. The human forces were being wiped out, one by one. There was no backup. There was no escape. "We can't give up," she said firmly. "The people on those colonies, our families, our friends, can't be left to the Zarnak's mercy. We'll find a way." Her voice carried the weight of leadership, a calm that contrasted sharply with the chaos surrounding them. But inside her heart was racing. She had lost her family in the first wave of Zarnak attacks, and every lost ship felt like a personal blow. Yet, she had no choice but to keep going. Humanity's survival depended on it. The enemy ships closed in, their dark silhouettes casting long shadows against the burning debris of the fleet. Voss's mind raced, calculating the odds, and then it hit her. There was one thing they could try, a risky move, one that could either save them or get them all killed. "Helm, set a course for the asteroid field on the starboard side," she ordered. "Engage the cloaking device on my mark." Kiera's fingers flew over the controls, and the ship's cloaking systems hummed to life. Voss knew this was their only chance. If they could hide in the field long enough to escape the Zarnak sensors, they might live to fight another day. The last light was old, but its stealth systems were one of the few things the Zarnak hadn't managed to crack yet. "Mark!" Voss shouted. The ship veered sharply, its engines sputtering as it dove into the dense asteroid belt. The surrounding rocks and debris would offer temporary cover, but it was only a matter of time before the Zarnak would find them. Voss gritted her teeth. They had to buy time. "All hands, brace for impact." Kiera yelled as a barrage of Zarnak missiles locked onto their position. The ship lurched violently as the asteroid field erupted in flashes of light and heat. Voss's heart pounded as she held her breath, her eyes locked on the screen. They couldn't escape this battle, but they might survive long enough to regroup. If they lived, they could bring the fight to the Zarnak. If they died, well, humanity's last hope would die with them. She wouldn't let that happen. Not while she still had breath in her lungs. The last light coasted through the asteroid field, its engines barely humming as the cloaking device shimmered at its limits. The crew had managed to elude the Zarnak ships, temporarily, but the silence that followed was more oppressive than any sound. Captain Elena Voss stood at the bridge, her fingers still hovering over the controls, waiting for any sign that the Zarnak had tracked them. The tension was thick enough to cut with a knife. "Captain," said Jace, his voice low, "we're safe for now, but how long can we keep this up? The Zarnak won't stop hunting us." Voss took a breath and nodded. The truth stung. Their fuel reserves were low, and their cloaking device wouldn't hold for long under such constant use. They needed to find allies, and they needed to do it quickly. "Agreed, but we can't fight this alone. It's time we stop running and start making contact with anyone willing to help." She turned to Lieutenant Kara. "I need you to open up encrypted channels to the Ankara and Rail sectors. Let's see if we can raise someone. If not, we'll need to get creative." Kira worked quickly, tapping into every available communication channel. For several tense minutes, there was only static, the cold hum of the void surrounding them. Then the screen flickered to life. "We've got a transmission," Kira said, voice tight with a mix of hope and fear. "It's from the Ankara." Voss leaned forward, her heart pounding in her chest. The Ankara were one of the galaxy's most feared warrior species, known for their brutal tactics and indomitable spirit. But they had always kept to themselves, avoiding larger galactic politics, until now. On the screen, a grizzled, scarred figure appeared. His green skin was mottled with the marks of countless battles, and his eyes burned with intensity. "This is Commander Trock of the Ankara," he said, his voice a deep growl. "You've got a lot of nerve contacting us, human. The Zarnak have already ravaged our worlds. What makes you think we'll risk our lives for you?" Voss met his gaze with unwavering confidence. "Because we share the same enemy. The Zarnak are not just destroying your people. They are trying to rewrite the galaxy in their image. If we don't stand together, we'll all fall." Trock stared at her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Finally he spoke. "You have guts, human. That's something I can respect. I'll see what we can do to help, but don't think for a second that this will be easy." The transmission cut off abruptly, and Voss exhaled in relief. It was a small victory, but a victory nonetheless. The Ankara would help, even if only reluctantly. They'd need more than just one species, though, if they were to stand a chance against the Zarnak. Before she could say another word, Kira interrupted. "Captain, there's more. I'm picking up a signal from the rail system. It's coming in fast." The ship shuddered as another transmission came through. This time, the image on the screen was a slender, ethereal figure, draped in flowing robes of dark fabric. Their pale skin glowed faintly, and their eyes held a deep, ancient wisdom. "I am Seraph of the Rail," the figure said, their voice calm and precise. "Your people have endured much, but you are not alone in this struggle. The Rail have watched the Zarnak for millennia. We will help you, but only if you are willing to learn." Voss raised an eyebrow. "Learn what?" "The ways of the Rail," Seraph said. "We hold knowledge of the Zarnak, their origins and their weaknesses. But we will not offer it freely. You must prove that humanity can handle the burden of such power." Voss was taken aback, but quickly recovered. "We'll do whatever it takes. Humanity has already proven that it can fight when the odds are against us. We can handle what you offer." Seraph nodded slowly. Then, "Let us begin." The transmission cut off, leaving the bridge in a stunned silence. Voss looked around at her crew, their faces a mixture of disbelief and cautious hope. For the first time in what felt like forever, they had a real chance. "Prepare for a rendezvous with the rail," Voss ordered, her voice resolute. "We're going to need everything they know if we're going to defeat the Zarnak." As the last light moved toward the rail system, the crew felt a spark of something they hadn't experienced in weeks: hope. The galaxy was not lost. Not yet. And with these new, unlikely allies, humanity had a fighting chance to bring order back to the shattered cosmos. The rail homeworld was a place of eerie beauty, an ancient planet cloaked in mist and bathed in a perpetual twilight. Its surface was a labyrinth of crystalline structures that hummed with strange energy, and its vast cities seemed to float above the ground, suspended in the air by technologies that defied understanding. As the last light entered the rail system, its crew couldn't help but marvel at the world that had remained hidden from the galaxy for so long. Inside the ship's command center, Captain Elena Voss stood before the view screen, her gaze fixed on the planet below. The rail had been reluctant to offer their aid, but after hours of negotiation, they had agreed to meet with her and her crew. Now, the moment of truth was upon them. "Captain, we've established a secure channel with the rail," Kiera reported, her voice steady despite the tension in the air. "They're ready for us to dock." Voss nodded, her mind racing. She didn't know what to expect from the rail. Ancient and enigmatic, they were a mystery to most of the galaxy. But their knowledge of the Zarnak could be the key to turning the tide of war. The docking procedure was seamless, the ship gliding toward the rail's floating city like a shadow in the dark. As the last light settled onto a platform that seemed to defy the laws of physics, Voss and her senior officers gathered in the ship's briefing room. There was no time for hesitation. Every second counted. "Brace yourselves," Voss said, her voice calm but firm. "We're about to meet our allies. Let's make sure we don't waste this opportunity." As the door to the docking bay slid open, Voss stepped onto the platform, flanked by Commander Jace Malin and Lieutenant Kera. The atmosphere of the rail city was unnerving, like something out of a dream. The air was thick with an ethereal mist, and the glowing crystals that adorned the city pulsed with an otherworldly rhythm. It was clear that the rail were unlike any species they had encountered before. And then, standing in front of them, was Seraph. The rail leader's form seemed to shimmer in the low light, as if part of them were woven from the very mist that surrounded the city. Seraph's eyes, glowing with ancient wisdom, met Voss's with an unsettling calmness. "Welcome, Captain Voss," Seraph said, their voice like a soft breeze rustling through the trees. "I trust your journey was not too taxing." Voss forced a smile, trying to steady her nerves. "It's been a long road. But we're here for a reason, Seraph. We need your help. The Zarnak are destroying everything, and we don't have much time." Seraph regarded her quietly for a moment. "You are wise to come, but you are not prepared. The Zarnak are no ordinary conquerors. Their empire is built on more than just might. They wield something far darker." "What do you mean?" Voss asked, her voice laced with urgency. Seraph's eyes narrowed slightly, as if measuring Voss's resolve. "The Zarnak are not of this universe. They are from beyond the stars, beings who seek to reshape the very fabric of reality to suit their needs. They are not invincible, but they have mastered forces that could tear the galaxy apart." A chill ran down Voss's spine. The Zarnak had already demonstrated their power, but this revelation sent her mind reeling. What kind of forces? Seraph gestured toward the horizon, where a glowing orb hung suspended in the air. The Zarnak's true weapon is not their ships or their armies. It is a weapon of the mind, a device that can bend reality itself, controlling time and space. It is how they conquered entire star systems in mere days. Commander Malin's voice was low, filled with disbelief. Are you saying the Zarnak have the power to rewrite the laws of the universe? Yes, Seraph replied. And they intend to use it to remake the galaxy in their image. Your people, Captain, are the key to stopping them. You are the only species that has shown the ability to resist their control. Voss's heart raced. She had always known that humanity was different, but hearing it from the rail made the weight of their situation sink in even deeper. How can we stop them? How do we even fight something like that? Seraph's expression softened slightly, and they raised a hand, palm open. There is a way, but it will not be easy. The Zarnek's weapon is hidden on a world they have kept secret for millennia, a world buried in the heart of their empire. To reach it, you will need more than just strength. You will need knowledge, unity, and the will to sacrifice everything. The room fell silent as the gravity of Seraph's words settled over them. Voss knew that this was their one chance. They had to find a way to infiltrate the heart of the Zarmek Empire, to strike at the very core of their power. We'll do whatever it takes, Voss said, her voice firm. Seraph nodded, a flicker of approval in their glowing eyes. Then the journey begins now. As the rail leader led them deeper into the heart of their city, Voss felt a renewed sense of purpose. The road ahead would be treacherous, filled with unknown dangers. But humanity had faced impossible odds before, and they would face them again. The war for the galaxy was far from over, and this time humanity would lead the charge. The journey to the rail's hidden vault felt like a dream, or a nightmare, depending on how one looked at it. As they followed Seraph through the winding corridors of the city, Voss couldn't help but feel a sense of awe. The rail were as ancient as they were enigmatic, their knowledge of the galaxy stretching far beyond anything the human race had ever encountered. But the mystery they carried was also a burden, for it was clear that the rail had seen the galaxy fall before. They understood the weight of what was at stake. The passageways opened into a vast chamber, a vault that pulsed with soft, glowing energy, like the heart of a living being. In the center stood an altar, upon which rested an object that glowed with a dull, ancient light. It was a relic, an artifact from a time before even the rail had emerged from the void. "This is the key," Seraph said, their voice echoing slightly in the stillness of the room. "The Zarnek's power is tied to a force far older than them, an ancient energy that predates the rise of any civilization in this galaxy. This artifact was created to control that energy, to either bind it or destroy it." Voss stepped forward, her boots clicking softly against the stone floor. The artifact was a sphere, made of an unfamiliar metallic material that shimmered in the low light. It was surrounded by intricate carvings, strange symbols that seemed to shift and change as she looked at them. It felt alive, pulsing with an energy that made her skin tingle. "How does it work?" Voss asked, her voice tense with anticipation. Seraph's eyes glowed brighter, as if they were seeing something beyond the physical world. "The artifact is a key to an ancient weapon, a device capable of manipulating the very fabric of space and time. But it is not something you can simply wield. It must be unlocked, and only the chosen can do so." Commander Jace Malin stepped forward, his brow furrowed. "What do you mean by chosen? Is this some kind of prophecy?" Seraph's gaze shifted to Voss, and the weight of their unspoken words settled heavily on her shoulders. "The artifact chooses its wielder. The energy within it responds to the will of those who seek to control it. But there is a catch. The power of the artifact can only be harnessed by those who can master both their minds and their hearts. If you are not ready, it will destroy you." Voss felt a chill run down her spine. This was no ordinary weapon. This was something far more dangerous. Something that could either save them or doom them all. "We don't have the luxury of time," she said, her voice firm. "We need to move quickly. The Zarnak are preparing something. They have a super weapon, and if we don't stop them soon, it will be too late." Seraph nodded, their expression unreadable. "Indeed. But to use this artifact, you must first understand its true nature. You will not simply use it to destroy the Zarnak's weapon. You will have to destroy their very foundation. The Zarnak's empire is built on the manipulation of reality itself. This artifact can undo that, but you must be ready to pay the price." Voss glanced at her crew. The stakes had never been higher. The weight of the rail's words hung in the air like a storm cloud, and for a moment she wondered if they were truly prepared for what lay ahead. "We'll do what we must," she said, meeting each of her crew members' eyes. "This is the only way." Seraph's gaze softened slightly. "Very well. You will need to travel to the heart of the Zarnak Empire to unlock the artifact's true power. There, you will find the source of their manipulation, an ancient machine hidden beneath the surface of their capital world. Destroy that machine, and the Zarnak's grip on reality will shatter. But be warned, the Zarnak will stop at nothing to protect it. They will come for you, and they will come in force." The weight of Seraph's warning hung over them as they stood in the vault, contemplating the path ahead. The artifact was their only hope, but it was also a dangerous gamble. If they succeeded, they would have the power to defeat the Zarnak and restore order to the galaxy. But if they failed, Voss pushed the thought away. There was no room for failure. Not now, not when humanity was on the line. "How do we get to this machine?" she asked, her voice steady. Seraph's eyes darkened. "You will need to infiltrate the Zarnak capital world, Karathar. It is heavily guarded, and its defenses are nearly impenetrable. But there is a way in. The Zarnak have a traitor among their ranks, an ally of sorts. We have made contact with him. He will help you." The revelation hit like a shockwave. "A traitor," Voss repeated. "Who is he?" Seraph's expression remained stoic, but there was an undercurrent of something darker in their voice. "His name is Varro. He was once a high-ranking officer in the Zarnak fleet. He knows their secrets. But be careful, his loyalties are as shifting as the stars. You cannot trust him completely." Voss's mind raced. A traitor in the Zarnak's midst could be the key to their victory, but it also opened a door to even greater risk. Yet, in this war, risks were necessary. Humanity's survival depended on it. "Prepare the ship," Voss ordered. "We leave for Karathar at once. Time is running out." As the crew moved to make the necessary preparations, Voss lingered for a moment, staring at the artifact. She could feel its pull, its energy calling to her, but she also felt the weight of the responsibility that came with it. The future of the galaxy rested on their shoulders, and no matter the cost, they would carry that burden to the end. The last light slid through the void toward Karathar, the heart of the Zarnak Empire. Captain Elena Voss stood at the helm, her hands gripping the control panel as the ship's cloaking device hummed in low, steady pulses. The cold expanse of space stretched before them, a silent witness to the storm they were about to enter. Even though their cloaking system rendered them invisible to conventional sensors, every heartbeat felt like a countdown toward the inevitable. "We're approaching the Zarnak capital." Lieutenant Kara's voice broke through the tense silence. "Sensors are still detecting heavy enemy patrols near the planet's orbit. We'll have to thread the needle to avoid detection." Voss nodded. The Zarnak would be expecting a standard attack, not a covert operation. The subtlety of their approach was their only advantage. The idea of infiltrating the heart of the Zarnak Empire with their warship was both reckless and necessary. They had no choice but to move swiftly and carefully. "What's our status on Varro's coordinates?" Voss asked, turning to Commander Jason Malin, who had been liaising with the Zarnak defector. Malin's expression was grim. "He's waiting for us on the surface, at an abandoned research facility. The Zarnak have set up a blockade around the capital, but Varro's intel says the facility is still off the grid. He's confident we can land without alerting the Zarnak forces." "And what of his trustworthiness?" Voss asked, her voice low. She had never liked the idea of relying on a traitor, even one with inside knowledge. Trust, especially in these dire times, was a luxury they couldn't afford. "We'll find out soon enough," Mellon said. "But if Varro's intel is accurate, this may be our only chance." Voss's gaze remained fixed on the holographic map in front of her, displaying the swirling tides of enemy fleets encircling Kurathar. Every ship in the Zarnak Armada was converging on the planet. They were preparing for something, but no one knew what. She wasn't about to let them finish whatever dark plan they were hatching. Not while humanity still had a chance. "We make contact with Varro, and we take this one step at a time," Voss said, her voice hard. "Once we're on the surface, the artifact goes with us. We can't risk it being left behind." With that, she motioned to Kira. "Take us in," quietly. The crew worked in unison, guiding the last light into the planetary atmosphere. As they descended through Kurathar's thick, toxic clouds, the ship seemed to disappear into the world's jagged, dark terrain. The entire planet was shrouded in a suffocating darkness that felt alive, pulsing with an unnatural energy. It was as if the very atmosphere was a reflection of the Zarnak's grip on reality. When they touched down at the facility, a small outpost nestled in the shadows of a craggy mountain range, Voss breathed a quiet sigh of relief. They had made it, so far. Now they had to find Varro and get the answers they needed. The crew gathered their gear, preparing for what would be a tense, dangerous meeting. Voss had no illusions about the treachery that could lie ahead. Varro's motives were murky at best. The Zarnak were known for their mind-bending manipulation, and if Varro had been playing both sides, there was no telling how he might betray them. But this was their only lead, and they couldn't afford to turn away. The moment the ship's ramp lowered, a gust of cold wind blasted the crew. They quickly formed a perimeter around the ship, their weapons at the ready. The facility before them was old, its walls cracked and weathered, as though it had once served a purpose, but now stood forgotten, just like the rebellion Varro had once been a part of. "I'm not sensing any immediate threats," Kira murmured, eyes scanning the darkened landscape. "But that doesn't mean it's safe. Stay sharp." The crew advanced cautiously, moving toward the entrance of the facility. The dark walls seemed to close in around them, and the air was thick with the scent of old machinery and rust. As they reached the threshold, the doors slid open with a groan, revealing an expansive chamber lit only by the pale light of emergency power. In the center stood a figure, silhouetted against the dim glow of the facility's internal systems. "Captain Voss." Varro's voice rang out, smooth and almost mocking. "I see you've come to the heart of the storm. You must be braver than I thought." Voss stepped forward, her eyes narrowing as she scanned the figure before her. Varro was tall, with sharp features and an unsettling calm in his demeanor. He wore the uniform of the Zarnak, though it was old, scuffed, and slightly torn. His eyes, though, were what caught Voss's attention. They were cold, calculating, but not entirely without warmth. It was as if he were a man lost in two worlds at once. "We're here, Varro," Voss said, her voice steady. "We need to get inside their capital, and we need to know how to destroy the Zarnak's machine. Can you help us?" Varro's lips curled into a slight smile. "Help you," he said with a laugh. "I'm not doing this out of some misplaced sense of loyalty, Captain. But yes, I can help. The Zarnek's machine is in the heart of their capital, but getting there will require more than just guts. It requires precision, and a willingness to step into their mind-warped world." He paused, and Voss could see the flicker of something darker in his eyes, fear, or perhaps regret. "You'll need to be prepared for what lies ahead. If you fail, it won't just be the end of you. It will be the end of everything." Voss's pulse quickened. The time for games was over. "Then let's not waste any more time, Varro. Show us the way." The tension was palpable as Captain Voss and her crew followed Varro through the darkened halls of the abandoned Zarnek facility. The once imposing structure now felt like a tomb, its sterile, cold surfaces reflecting nothing but shadows. The air was thick with the acrid scent of decay, a stark contrast to the sterile efficiency of the Zarnek machines that had once filled the space. Now, only eerie silence remained. Varro led them through a series of winding corridors, his pace unhurried yet purposeful. Voss kept a sharp eye on him, though she sensed no immediate threat. His eyes, however, betrayed something deeper, an internal conflict that was hard to read. It was as though he had been hollowed out by his time in the Zarnek's service, caught between a broken past and an uncertain future. "You seem to know this place well," Voss remarked, her voice steady, though her mind was racing with questions. Varro glanced back at her, a flicker of something like amusement dancing in his cold, calculating gaze. "I once called it home," he replied cryptically. "But that was before the Zarnek's true nature became clear to me, before I saw what they were willing to sacrifice in the name of their twisted empire." "Why turn against them?" Voss asked, her curiosity piqued despite herself. Varro didn't answer immediately. Instead, he stopped at a large metal door and placed his palm against a sensor panel. The door slid open with a sharp hiss, revealing a narrow hallway beyond. As he motioned for them to enter, he spoke again, this time with an almost bitter edge to his voice. "The Zarnek are not what they appear. They have always known what they were doing. They twisted the minds of entire species, broke their spirits, and remade them in their own image. They conquer worlds, but they don't just kill. They consume." Voss's heart sank. "Consume?" Varro nodded. "They feed on the essence of a planet, its energy, its life force. The Zarnek Empire isn't just about power. It's about survival. They need more than just territory. They need to sustain themselves by draining entire systems. That's how they've endured for so long. And when their weapon is complete, they will have enough power to feed off the galaxy itself." The words hit harder than any blow Voss had received in the past weeks. If Varro was telling the truth, the Zarnak weren't just conquerors. They were parasites, feeding off entire civilizations in order to prolong their own existence. The implications were staggering. They weren't just fighting for survival, they were fighting to prevent the galaxy from being consumed by a race that had no place in the natural order. "We have to stop them," Voss muttered, more to herself than to anyone else. Varro's eyes flickered with a dark understanding. "You don't have to convince me, Captain. I've seen what they do. But you must understand, what they're doing now is far worse than anything they've done before. They've discovered something, an ancient power, something that could allow them to control entire star systems with just a thought. It's not just reality manipulation, it's something older, something that predates even them." Voss felt a chill run through her. The stakes had just become even higher. Whatever the Zarnak had uncovered, it wasn't just a weapon of war. It was something that could unravel the very fabric of existence itself. "We need to destroy the source," Voss said, her voice hardening with determination. "Where is it?" Varro led them deeper into the facility, toward a hidden lift that descended into the bowels of the building. "The heart of the Zarnek Empire lies beneath their capital," he said, his voice low. "The machine that powers their reality-bending technology is buried deep below the surface. It's shielded, heavily guarded, and encrypted beyond anything you can imagine. But we can access it, if you're willing to trust me." Voss didn't hesitate. "We don't have a choice." The lift descended into the depths of Karathar, its walls flickering with the occasional pulse of ancient Zarnek energy. As the deeper levels opened up before them, the atmosphere grew increasingly oppressive. The air felt dense, heavy with the weight of dark secrets and forbidden knowledge. The deeper they went, the more it felt as though the very walls were closing in around them, echoing with the sinister hum of something far more ancient than the Zarnak themselves. When the lift finally stopped, they stepped into a cavernous chamber, lit only by the faint, eerie glow of alien technology. At the center of the room stood a massive structure, an immense machine that seemed to pulse with an unnatural energy. Its surface was alive, shifting like liquid metal, its core vibrating with a hum that resonated deep within their bones. "This is it," Varro said, his voice barely above a whisper. "The Zarnek's true weapon. The machine that controls their reality-bending powers. It feeds off the life force of entire star systems, harnessing the energy to twist and warp the very fabric of space and time." Voss felt a cold dread settle in her stomach as she surveyed the machine. It was beyond anything she had ever imagined, an engine of unimaginable power, a relic of a time long past, and a tool of mass destruction that could reshape the galaxy in ways she couldn't yet comprehend. "We need to destroy it," Voss said, her voice resolute. "Varro, how do we stop it?" Varro stepped forward, his eyes scanning the machine's intricate patterns. "The key to disabling it lies in the artifact, the one you carry with you. It has the power to disrupt the machine's energy flow. But the moment you engage it, you'll trigger a chain reaction. The Zarnak will know you're here, and they won't let you leave alive." Voss's hand tightened around the artifact she carried, its weight now more burdensome than ever. The fate of the galaxy rested on their ability to destroy this machine, but the price of failure was too high to contemplate. "Then we make sure we don't fail," she said firmly. With a determined nod, Voss motioned for the team to get into position. The countdown had begun, and the storm that was about to break would either free the galaxy or end it all. The moment Voss stepped forward, the weight of the artifact in her hand felt like a burning brand, the energy radiating from it almost alive. She could feel it calling to the machine at the center of the cavernous chamber, a silent promise of destruction. Every nerve in her body screamed for action, but as she approached the machine, the air seemed to thicken. The very fabric of reality felt like it was bending and warping around them, as if the machine was already aware of their presence. Varro's voice broke through the tension, his tone cautious. "Once you activate the artifact, it will destabilize the machine's energy matrix. You must aim it directly at the core. But be warned, doing so will cause a chain reaction. The Zarnak will know what you've done immediately. They will not hesitate to destroy you." Voss nodded, steeling herself. "We don't have time for hesitation. We've come too far." She stepped closer to the pulsating machine, its surface shimmering with iridescent colors that seemed to dance just beyond her reach. The sheer power emanating from it was overwhelming, and the closer she got, the more her senses seemed to blur. The walls of the chamber, the very ground beneath her feet, seemed to tremble with the force of the machine's power. Kiera Malin and the rest of the crew formed a protective circle around her, their weapons trained on the dark corners of the room, eyes scanning for any signs of Zarnak reinforcements. The seconds ticked by like hours, the anticipation hanging heavily in the air. Varro stepped back, his eyes flicking toward the distant entrance to the chamber. The Zarnak know how to track the pulse of this machine. Once you fire it up, they'll come running. You won't have long. Voss glanced at him sharply. What's your plan? You're not coming with us. Varro's lips curled into a grim smile, but it didn't reach his eyes. I've played my part. You won't be able to outrun them, and I won't be able to keep you safe once the machine goes off. But you've got a chance to end this. Don't waste it. Voss felt a flicker of doubt, but there was no time for questions. She turned her attention back to the machine. This was it. The final gamble. She had to trust in everything she had been trained for, every decision that had led them to this point. Humanity's future hung in the balance. She raised the artifact, her fingers trembling slightly as she aligned it with the machine's central core. The energy within the artifact seemed to hum, resonating with the power of the machine before her. The two forces, ancient and new, alien and human, were on the verge of colliding. Voss took a deep breath, her heart hammering in her chest. With a steady hand, she activated the artifact. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, with a sharp, ear-splitting crack, the chamber seemed to explode in light. The artifact pulsed with a blinding glow, its energy converging onto the machine's core. The walls of the chamber shook violently as the machine's hum turned into a scream of agony. Sparks flew from its surface, and the ground beneath their feet cracked open as the entire structure began to destabilize. Move! Voss shouted, snapping out of the momentary trance. She ran back toward her team, who immediately followed, their boots pounding against the ground. As they retreated toward the lift, the chamber behind them erupted in a flash of blinding light. The machine's core exploded, sending shockwaves through the facility. The force of the blast knocked them off their feet, but Voss quickly regained her balance. The cavernous room was now filled with an infernal roar, a deep rumble that seemed to shake the very foundations of the planet. "We need to get out, now," Malin shouted, his voice barely audible over the deafening noise. The lift was their only escape route. Voss and her crew raced toward it, their movements desperate but precise. As they reached the lift, the doors slammed shut just as the entire facility groaned under the strain of the explosion. The ground shook violently beneath them as the lift's engines roared to life, pulling them up toward the surface. But even as they ascended, Voss knew they hadn't won yet. The Zarnak would be coming. They had only seconds, maybe less, before the entire empire descended upon them. The weight of their mission, of the lives lost and the sacrifices made, pressed heavily on her shoulders. As the lift shot toward the surface, the facility beneath them began to collapse, the echoes of the explosion still reverberating through the ground. Voss's thoughts raced. Had they truly destroyed the heart of the Zarnak's power, or had they merely unleashed something worse? The artifact had done its job, but at what cost? She didn't know, but there was no turning back now. The lift finally broke through the surface, and the crew emerged into the wasteland outside the facility. The desolate landscape seemed unchanged, but Voss knew that the galaxy was about to feel the full brunt of their actions. The Zarnak would retaliate, and their wrath would be swift. But for the first time in a long while, Voss felt something that had been missing from her heart, a spark of hope. They had struck the first blow, and maybe, just maybe, it would be enough to change the tide of the war. But as the sound of enemy ships roared in the distance, she knew they couldn't rest. The final battle had only just begun. The sunless skies above Karathar were alive with the shadow of enemy ships, dark forms descending from the heavens like vultures sensing their prey. The last light had barely touched down before the atmosphere crackled with energy, the hum of the Zarnak warships growing louder by the second. Captain Voss could hear the distant roar of their engines, the sound of the storm closing in. "Captain, we're surrounded," Kiera reported from the tactical console, her voice tense. "Zarnak ships closing fast. They know we're here, and they're not alone." Voss's jaw tightened. "How long do we have?" "Minutes, if that," Kiera replied, her fingers flying over the controls, trying to assess their options. "The only way out is through the blockade." Voss turned to face her crew, her heart pounding in her chest. They had done it. They had destroyed the machine, the heart of the Zarnak's war machine. But now the universe had become a far more dangerous place. The Zarnak would stop at nothing to hunt them down. They knew what humanity was capable of now, and they would not allow this spark of rebellion to grow any larger. "We have to hold them off," Voss said, her voice low but commanding. "Get us back into the air, Kiera. We'll break through the blockade." "Captain, the ship's been damaged," Kiera replied, her voice betraying concern. "We've lost a quarter of our engines. Our shields are at 40%. We're not going to make it through a full-on assault." Voss's eyes hardened. They had no choice. They had to fight their way through or die trying. "Jace," she called, turning to her second-in-command, "prepare the crew. We're going to need every fighter in the air. If we're going to break through, we need to create chaos. Enough confusion to slip past their perimeter." Malin nodded grimly. "Understood, Captain. I'll rally the troops." As the crew scrambled to their stations, Voss's mind raced. The Zarnak were relentless, and they had the advantage in numbers, but humanity's greatest strength had always been their resilience, their ability to turn the tides when it seemed impossible. This would be no different. "Activate all remaining combat drones," she ordered. "Kiera, set us on an evasive course. We'll need to use the terrain to our advantage." The last light shook as the drone bays opened, releasing their combat drones into the air. These nimble, smaller craft were designed for rapid strikes and agility. They would buy the crew precious moments as they made their way toward the blockade's weak points. Voss gripped the edge of her command chair, her mind filled with memories of the journey that had led them here. From the first encounter with the Zarnak to the harrowing fight at the facility, every battle had been a test of their endurance. But now the final confrontation was upon them. This wasn't just about stopping the Zarnak. It was about sending a message to the galaxy that humanity would never bow to the tyranny of the Zarnak, no matter the cost. A sudden jolt shook the ship, followed by the shrill alarm of a proximity warning. Voss's gaze snapped to the viewport, where the massive silhouette of a Zarnak dreadnought filled the sky. The enemy ship was closing in fast, weapons charging. "Brace for impact," Voss shouted, her voice cutting through the chaos. The last light lurched violently as the Zarnak dreadnought unleashed a barrage of energy blasts. The shields flared, flickering under the pressure, but they held. Barely. "Shields at 15%. We can't take much more." Kiera cried, her voice strained. "I'm adjusting the angle. We'll use their fire to push us through." "Do it," Voss barked. "Full throttle." With a lurch, the last lights surged forward, the blast shields groaning as they absorbed the barrage of incoming fire. The Zarnak dreadnought's firepower was overwhelming, but Voss's crew was skilled, maneuvering the warship through the explosions, using the massive ship's agility to dodge incoming blasts. As the blockade closed in, the remaining fighters launched from the ship, streaking into the sky to engage the enemy. The space around them became a chaotic battlefield. Drones weaving through the sky, human fighters dueling Zarmek interceptors, and explosions rocking the very atmosphere. For a moment, it seemed as though the battle would consume everything. But Voss knew this was their only chance. Push through. Voss shouted to her crew, her voice unwavering even as another blast rocked the last light. We're almost through the gap. Kiera called out. One more push and we'll make it into open space. Just as the enemy closed in for the kill, the last light tore through the gap in the blockade, engines roaring with all their remaining power. The Zarmek dreadnought fired one last blast, grazing the ship's hull as it passed through, but it was too late. The blockade had been breached. Get us to Farunis, Voss commanded. We need to regroup and prepare for the final assault. As they punched through the blockade and into the relative safety of open space, Voss's heart slowed, though the adrenaline still thrummed through her veins. The crew was battered, but they had made it. Captain, Kiera said, a slight note of surprise in her voice, we've received a transmission from the fleet. They're ready to move. The rebellion is growing, Captain. Humanity is rallying. Voss's gaze hardened with resolve. Then we strike. We end this now. As the last light tore through the stars, the battle was far from over. But this was their moment. Humanity was no longer on the defensive. They were not just fighting for survival, they were fighting to reclaim their future. And no matter the odds, Voss knew they would face it head-on. The Zarmek's empire would fall, and the galaxy would once again know freedom.